Well, now this is interesting. Hello, everyone. Well, last week when I was making my weekly report, honestly, I couldn't really imagine that I would make another one. And I mentioned last week that that weekly report could be my last weekly report, at least during this current period of pandemic. Um, but because back then, I thought I would have nothing to talk about this week, but well, I was wrong, at least at that point. And as it turned out, there are plenty of things that I can talk about. And if you remember, I believe 2 weeks ago, in my second last weekly report, I mentioned that this curve of Beijing is highly unusual. Why is that? Back then, I compared this curve, namely, with other line graphs of daily COVID cases in other regions, even in few years back of China, and as said, this drop is just too sharp. This sudden drop of daily cases in Beijing is too rapid. It's too sharp, and it's very unlikely that there wouldn't be another so-called another peak in daily cases back then. And as turned out, I was right. So last week, I think I did my my weekly report on maybe on the 6th or 7th. I can't quite remember. Yeah, I believe that would be the 6th. So back then, we were here. So it's kind of kind of like a valley in this graph. And even as we can see I believe on the 8th of June, yes, 8th of June, there are actually absolutely zero COVID cases being reported in Beijing. However, we are now here, so we don't really have the complete data of yesterday, but only in this cell for a medium case number. We only don't have complete data on this one, but as we can see, the last 4 days, we've been having over 50 cases every day. It is not very large compared with many other countries or cities, especially in the city with I believe there's like 20 million people or something, 23. I can't quite remember, but I believe 23. I think I can check from here. Yes, 21 million people in city with of this size. This number is not large, but compared with a few days earlier, because last week when I was doing my weekly report, the whole city was kind of like immersed into the happiness of life, so-called life going back to normal. But back then I mentioned it was actually a new normal where people need to renew their lives by PCR tests maybe every 3 days or so. So yeah, back then I thought, maybe the government just want to forget about this disease and put lives into the new normal, and let's just get on with this. And so we'll just continue for, I don't know, for however long. But in as I mentioned, in the last 4 days, including today, there is a very sharp increase in daily case numbers. And so that's situation number one. And also at this point, I just want to maybe just show you a couple of the curves that I found before. Just let you to know what I'm really talking about, why the curve this time was unusual. Because as we can see, this is a picture reported on New York Times website. These are the data, I believe, from 2020. So that was the beginning of the emergence of COVID-19. And so as we can see here, actually we have the mainland China data. The data on exactly this region exactly this region I'm talking about. But however, we can see that even back in 2020, there was like one peak in the curve and drop a little, and there was immediately a higher peak in this graph. So that was the data of mainland China back in 2020. And for South Korea, we can see a kind of like a complete bell-shaped curve right here. But at the end, although the line dropped, but there was a little bit like going up, a little bit increase at the end. I don't really have the complete graph for South Korea. I don't know how high this line would go eventually. But let's say, well, there was a little bit increase at the end. I do think there was some sort of up and downs after this point. And as for Iran, the curve actually looks like a little bit like a plateau or something. So it kind of goes up and kind of like goes up and down, and then goes up again and kind of stay high, stay at a very high point at the end of the graph. And as for Italy, the US and Spain, we don't really have a very complete shape of the graph in this picture. So, but as we can see from the curves of mainland China, South Korea, and Iran, they're never been like they could drop from a highest point right down to zero. It wouldn't be possible back in 2020. So that's why I said this Beijing curve was very unusual. Even back in maybe 2 or 3 weeks back, the Beijing government was declaring victory over this, this wave of pandemic. But obviously they were wrong. There was no It's nothing unusual, but clearly they haven't really achieved their so-called zero COVID goal. And so that's 2020. And here's another example. I think this is from early 2021. And as we can also see that the curves of the Czech Republic, for instance, Slovenia, Britain, Ireland is a little bit interesting. So they're all like going up and down, and usually after a very high data, very high number of daily cases, it's very unlikely that the case number will drop to zero, or people will see the end of that. Because if we say COVID is a infectious disease, it is transmissive. We can't really, it's infectious or transmissive disease. We can't really, expect the case number will drop to zero after so many cases being detected on one day. Because those cases, especially in China, where people need to participate in mass testing, people just lining up outside with no, literally just nearly no protections for themselves, and lining up, gathering together and to have the test. it's very unlikely that all those numbers reported on that day will not pass the virus on to some other people. Is very unlikely. And finally, I believe this is reported by San Francisco Chronicles. It's like a regional news agency in California, I believe. I'm not really familiar with American geography or anything about America, but still we can see the curves of many what they call counties in, I believe, California. So this is San Francisco. So they're always like, it's like going up, and there's a flat areas also, especially for Santa Clara. There will be a flat line, but staying on a high point rather than staying at zero. Or it will be something like a San Mateo, looks like a bell, kind of like a bell-shaped curve. So it will always be like this. And San Francisco, as I understand, that's a big city. In many aspects, would be similar to Beijing, and they also have a curve, kind of like going continuously up until one point. So yeah, so those are the examples that I talked about maybe 2 weeks earlier, that I used to compare with this curve of Beijing in this year. So that's why I concluded that the curve, at least back in the a week ago, was very unusual. So I said there will be another peak at some point, if they're honest about their data. And here we got it. So last three entries in the last 4 days, there's a increase. And this time, as for now, policy-wise, I have heard they are somewhere around 4,000 to 6,000 people have already been deemed close contacts of COVID. So it's very likely that all those people have already been transported to concentration camps, maybe not locally as quarantine hotels or container hospitals. So that's the situation. So please bear in your minds that the suffering of people in China, and how many families were broken, how many business have been bankrupted or facing some troubles. People are facing troubles, say in paying debts, paying their mortgage, and so they are losing their houses, their jobs, and even their families. And moreover, they have lost their dignities as human beings and being confined either to their small apartments, microrayons, or even being sent to a concentration camp when they're confined to maybe a little cell in a hospital, so-called hospital, or maybe a little hotel room. Because I published a video that was from a very reliable source. I know that person. That person is my one of my co-workers in Beijing, and I believe also his family. I don't know. Well, he has children, or maybe one child. I don't know. So maybe the child is not in the concentration camps, but I do believe he and his wife have been sent to the concentration camps, just because there was one case in the Hutong. That's like a little alley area, residential area in the alley in Beijing. There was one person in that area having tested positive. so that's what happened to all his families. But seems to be okay with that. In fact, most Chinese people I know, they are totally okay with this COVID policies in China. Rather, they're used to it. And also, I mentioned this before. If anyone mentions coexisting with COVID in Chinese society, whether that's of China, mainland China, or the Republic of China, Taiwan, or Singapore, or wherever, even Hong Kong, whatever, wherever society with a very large number of Chinese people, Chinese population, it is like a political suicidal if you mention coexisting with COVID in those societies, because people in that society, most of Chinese people especially, they will just rebel against you, even because they don't believe that people can actually coexist with such a disease. They want, if you just observe what Chinese people do to their gardens, or to the wilderness areas in their country, you can easily see they want to control the nature completely. They want to manipulate the nature. They want to build a cement or concrete road through a forest, maybe just to make the road very flat, and so people can walk on that, on a concrete road rather than the earth. So if you if you climb a mountain or go to a mountainous area in China, they are in generally they're in general very different from the mountainous areas. Say in Australia, whatever, you can actually have the dirt road, or very narrow walkway just through the mountains. You can't really find those places in China very often, because they want to manipulate the nature. They don't want to live with the nature. So that's kind of the one of the features of Chinese people. So at this point, I don't think many Chinese people can really tolerate that there is some sort of strange disease going around in their societies. They want to eliminate all the causes of death, pretty much. Also, kind of also about the smearing China. We hear about this from Chinese media and Chinese officials a lot these days. So there are always countries that just want to so-called smear China for whatever the Chinese government does. If they want to coexist with COVID, probably some media, especially overseas media, will jump out and say, Chinese government is so powerless in controlling the pandemic. So there are so many cases. They will say that. And if they enforce this very strict zero COVID policy, there are also people jumping out and say, this is such a cruelty and tyranny in China. It could be the same media agent that says the both. So I have to admit there are some media, especially mainstream media in the West, are pretty double standard. But as for me, I have always been saying that COVID is nothing to worry about, because it's just one. Firstly, it's just one of many causes of death. People die at some point for some reasons, and it's totally natural for people to die. And also, if we compare with other infectious diseases like influenza, as I mentioned many weeks ago, COVID is not so serious if we compare that with influenza data. So we can all see everything here. I don't really want to explain these two tables all over again. So please check my earlier videos if you wish to know more about these two tables. But in general, actually, this estimated yearly number of total cases has been dropped since the in the recent days when there was a drop in daily case numbers. So now this number shows if this pandemic kind of goes down in this trend, there will be 14,000 people in Beijing being infected in 1 year. Again, and this only occupies 0.07%, which I believe that's 7 per million. 7 per thousand, 7 per 10,000. I can't quite remember. I believe that's 10 per thousand. Yeah, I could be wrong. So I'm not saying this is necessarily low or high as a percentage. However, if we compare that with the yearly infection rate of influenza as reported by World Health Organization, the lowest possible infection rate of influenza is 5%, but for COVID, in particular, the Omicron variant is 0.07%. So we can see the difference. And again, we can see also the difference of severe illness rate. For it is still lower. It's slightly lower than the minimum rate of severe illness of influenza, and it's way lower than the maximum. At death, again, there's no death being reported in Beijing, so death rate is literally zero. Okay, so that's the first the first point I wanted to make. Is that actually there was like a couple of points, but whatever. The first point is the curve. So I was right about the curve. So it's not usual, and there is another increase in daily cases happening now. And so the second point I want to make is that I want to draw your attention to the increase in asymptomatic cases being reported in the last 4 days. As we can see, the gray bars in this graph, they indicate the numbers of asymptomatic, which means they are tested positive, but they don't really have any symptoms. So usually in many other countries, people like this wouldn't really be, participating the COVID test. Probably if they're fine, they would just, live their lives as usual. So as we can see at the beginning of this wave of so-called pandemic, in the first few days, actually there were no asymptomatic cases being reported at all. So this means back then, probably only the people had some symptoms. When they worry about their health, they would actually go to have a test. And in the middle of this wave, we can see the number of asymptomatic cases being increasing, and at the middle of that. And so those are the days with compulsory mass testing nearly every day, as we can see from pretty much from the 25th of April to let's say to the 21st of May. So it's approximately 1 month of time. It is compulsory for people to have COVID tests either every day or every other day. So that was the case. So back then, obviously, a lot of people dragged from their houses to participate in the COVID test. So we can see there's some asymptomatic cases being reported because they're forced to participate in that. However, back then I could observe, at least in my microrayon from time to time, the people actually going for the test been dropping, the number of dropping, as that probably indicates that the people they just didn't really want to take that test anymore, so they're just hiding their houses, their apartments, so they've been avoiding that. So I would say that's a way to resist. However, as you can see in the last 4 days, the numbers of asymptomatic cases have been reaching a new maximum. And on the 11th there was on the 10th actually, that was the maximum number, with 37. So what this mean? I think this could indicate two things. The two things are not either or. It could be two phenomena occurring simultaneously. So they both could be true and they're happening. So one is that they have adjusted the accuracy of the PCR test. By they, I mean Beijing's government and or those PCR test institutes. They have, because I think back in late May, if I remember correctly, in late May, there are a couple of PCR test agencies being reported of decreasing the accuracy of their tests, just to make more money, or maybe they have some goodwills. I can't really tell. However, after all those, there have been some people being arrested who are involved in that, and so in recent days they could probably they adjusted the accuracy a little bit. So the PCR test these days in Beijing could be more. They could detect. Yes, let's just say I don't really want to say all these cases are actually, if they are reported positive, they're actually positive, because there's no way to tell, and there's a couple of talks have been done by other experts on this point. Just say it is more likely to get a positive result these days, even they have no symptoms. So that could be one thing indicated by the increase in asymptomatic, the increased number in asymptomatic cases daily. Also, the second thing, this could indicate a very large number of compelled COVID tests. So just like back in from late April to late May. So nowadays I have heard, as I mentioned before, there are like 4,000 to 6,000 people have been confined. Likely they've been confined to either to their own homes, or they've been confined to concentration camps, and those people would likely to have PCR tests for whatever frequency their confiners would like. So they're all presumably and imaginably they are compelled to have those tests. So of course, even they have no symptoms at all, it is also very likely for them to be tested positive. So these are the two things that this increase in asymptomatic cases can indicate. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much about everything I want to put in this week's weekly report. Also, I think in general, it's like breaking a horse. If you ever try to break a horse, or you've seen that on a movie or on TV, sometimes you want to tame a horse. You can't just break the horse once and for all. You have to do that every day or many times a day. Just by riding on the horse, just to get the horse used to a person riding on the back of it. So I would say this kind of like this like a training or taming a horse. This is what the Beijing's government is doing. So at the first time, they have been reported a very large number of cases. So people were rightfully put under lockdown, and then they kind of relaxed a little bit, and they just bam, and there are cases again. And so just let people see, just few days. We just reopened for few days, and in fact, this case has been reported in these days. Allegedly, they're related to, I think, one so-called COVID positive person. They went to a pub, and he infected a couple of other people. So that's what they say. So just like this, just open for a few days, and they bang and give you some cases, and let people see. That's how dangerous. That's how dangerous. To have everything opening up. So that's how much you need the government, right? So that I believe that's the underlying message that at least some parts of the government wants to send to the people. And based on my observation, most of the people in China, they buy that. They have already bought this message, that they believe that the government is very essential for them to so-called defeat this virus. Okay, and so that's pretty much everything. You have a good day. Yes, if you live your life well, if you are in some free countries, not in China. And if you're in China, I would like to know how are you doing. So you can leave a comment. And also, if you agree or disagree with me, with my analysis, with my method of data collecting, or whatever, anything I said in this weekly report, please leave a comment down below and let me know. And I would like to learn about different opinions, and I would like to have a good arguments. So yeah, have a good one. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.